This video was recorded live before a canned studio audience. It's Friday Night Movie Reviews, and here they are, Chris and Keith.
Thank you.
I'm Keith.
I'm Chris.
And this is Friday Night Movie Reviews. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to be reviewing another movie, and this is going to be a movie that we're going to be doing in probably a short series. Might do one each time we drop a review. This is a part of our Halloween series.
Yep. And it goes right along with our rental review series, so it fits right into that category, especially with this movie.
Right.
This one was heavily rented when I was little, so the title of our video gives this one away. We are reviewing The Lost Boys.
Yep, kind of keeping in with our theme of 80s style movies. So this one, if you are any type of a vampire fan, then this movie is going to be right up your alley, because this is kind of the movie that basically started it all with the whole vampire fad, especially with the whole vampires are cool fad.
Yes, and this one plays like a music video. Everybody's young, hip, good-looking, men, women, all of them in this film, and it reeks of that. When you watch this, it's like it just oozes sexiness, and this brings it to the forefront. And everybody is young, hip, new popular actor, except for your older actors, like Diane Wiest playing the mother. You have Bernard Hughes playing the grandfather, and you have Ed Herman playing the boyfriend of Diane Wiest in the film.
And then you have the other, more popular of the younger generation.
Kiefer Sutherland. Jason Patric. Jamie Gertz. You even have Alex Winter from Bill and Ted.
Right.
He plays the young Marco.
Right.
The small vampire you'll see in the film.
So there are a lot of pretty big names that sort of show up in this film, but it was when it was earlier in their career, back when they weren't really as popular as they got to be later on in the 80s.
And this does have the two Coreys, and it has Corey Haim and Corey Feldman. Haim plays the main actor in the film, Sam, and then Corey Feldman is one of the Frog Brothers.
Right. So the basic premise of this movie is you have a family who has just moved into this new area. I think it's kind of like a beach, kind of a beach community.
Yes.
And they've just moved into this new area. They
moved into her father's house because she just got a divorce.
Right. So it's a single mom with her two sons, and they're both kind of, I would say they're both like teenage years, but one is on up in the teenage years, close to being probably about 19 or 20.
Yeah.
The other one is probably just entering into his teenage years.
Yeah, I'd say 9th grade, somewhere in there.
Right, something like that. And they move into this beach community, and the older teenage son, of course, in his rebellious times, he's going out and trying to find new friends to hang out with, and he sort of gets in with the wrong crowd. And turns out that the wrong crowd is not just these cool
biker kids,
biker kind of punk rock kind of kids wearing the leather jackets and the torn up blue jeans and stuff like that. They are actually vampires. And the two he mentioned earlier, the two Coreys play a couple of kids called the Frog Brothers, and they try to warn the younger brother. They try to warn him, hey, look, this is going on here. But then he don't really believe it.
He's like, I don't read horror comics. He doesn't believe that Corey Haim doesn't believe Sam, his character, doesn't believe that vampires are real, and Corey Feldman and the other Frog brother, and he was an actor who really didn't get that much attention, so I forget his name off the top of my head. But they try to reward Corey Haim, and he's just like, oh no, I don't read horror comics, and that's not cool. He was more of a Superman guy because this was a Warner Brothers movie, and it is directed by Joel Schumacher. I should put that out there. So Joel Schumacher does make good movies, not just Batman Forever and Batman and Robin that most people will know him from.
He did.
This movie, was one of his first ones that really got him in there because he made music videos before he did this. And really his music video background really kind of set how this movie looks, it feels.
Yeah.
It really helped him bringing in this young, hip people to be in this movie. It just brought that aesthetic to it because it really did. You thought the vampires were cool in this,
right? And the movie is really reminiscent of the old 1980s, music videos. Has a lot of the 80s style. The 80s music in it. The soundtrack for this movie was like phenomenal. It was just really good. It had a lot of really popular 80s music for the time. But the whole movie just had this you were right. It had this whole feel of a music video.
Yeah. Yeah. And to use that as a tool to get it for a vampire movie. Who would have ever thought? And it just flowed together so well. And I think that's the reason why, even though this movie is very 80s when you look at it, it has stood the test of time because people young weren't even born in the 80s. I was like 2 years old when this movie came out. I still love this movie. And people way younger than me, I'll show them to this and they, oh, we love The Lost Boys. It has just become that cult classic that gets passed down to generation. No matter how much things have changed in the world, that just shows you the power of how good this movie is.
Right. So this movie has very good lasting power, and it was like he said, a cult. It quickly became a cult classic. I remember when the movie came out in theaters, and I actually went and saw it in the theater, and it was just about an instant cult classic. Everybody at that time was, I'm telling you, this is like the grandfather of the vampires are cool movement.
Yep, and it really set some of the rules into effect. You had the garlic, not inviting a vampire into your house. Mm-hmm. So it still used elements like you saw in Salem's Lot and vampire movies that came before it, but it applied this nice 80s aesthetic and brought it home and made it cool. So no longer is it just some count in a castle up on a hill, or a vampire in a cloak hiding in a coffin. They're in this really cool decorative cave. It's got Jim Morrison up on the wall.
Right. Think of a teenager's room, a teenage boy's room, like during the 80s, and that's what the vampire's lair looked like.
It was incredible. It was like every little set piece in this movie, you're just like, yeah, that could be a music video.
Right.
And in fact, MTV was in its heyday during this, so you better believe the music videos for this were in heavy rotation because it had Lou Gramm from Foreigner. Mm-hmm. He did Lost in the Shadows, which was the theme song for the film. You had Cry Little Sister, which has gone on, and so many people have covered that song.
Right.
You have the infamous shirtless, oiled-up saxophone guy, Tim Capello, doing I Still Believe. And he still to this day goes out and performs. He was the saxophonist for Tina Turner. And he still performs I Still Believe to this day. I think that wasn't even his song. It was actually a cover song of a Christian 80s band because they wanted that band to perform, but they didn't want to do the movie because it was a vampire movie, went against their beliefs apparently. And no judgment there. It just that was their beliefs and all that kind of stuff. So he stepped in, did their song for them as a cover song. And it's funny because more people associate that being his song than the people it actually came from, which I find hilarious. But yeah, like he mentioned the soundtrack. I own that soundtrack. Like I own very few movie soundtracks, but that is one that I actually own. Like it has People Are Strange, which is it's not the Doors version. It's actually Echo and the Bunnymen's cover of that song. That's one of the great opening songs that you hear in the movie, and of course there are songs in the movie, of course, that don't occur on the soundtrack that you hear. You hear "Walk This Way" during the film, and you hear a bunch of other songs. "Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me." They play that in the in credits of this movie. It's just they did it right. Like he was like, I come from a music video background. We're gonna put some good music in this, and it works, and it stands the test of time. I actually use some of that music in my Halloween music that I play outside when I give out candy. So
So yeah, this movie, like I said, became an instant classic because of the feel that it generally gave, and because of how the movie was shot, and because of the time and the era that it was in. Um, we mentioned earlier the Frog Brothers. Now, what happens with this movie is so they move into this beach community, and they meet these two teenage boys named
Edgar Frog is the one that
Right.
Corey Feldman plays, and Corey Haim's character meets them at the comic book shop.
right.
While his older brother Michael is off chasing Star, played by Jamie Gertz,
Right.
who's with the vampires.
Right. So it turns out that these two guys know that there are vampires in the community. Now they know who the vampires are, but there is a top dog vampire, and they haven't really identified him yet.
Yeah, you know, they would think that it was Kiefer Sutherland's character David,
Right.
and really seems that way because he leads the group of biker vampires, and he gives a very commanding performance. And this was early on in Kiefer's career, and he just immediately stands out. Like
Yeah.
to this day, I still think about how cool he looks in that movie.
Yeah, he really did a phenomenal job in that movie. So think of the Frog Brothers as like a vampire, like Van Helsing.
Yep.
They are basically two teenage versions of Van Helsing. They are vampire hunters, and they know all of the ins and outs of how to get rid of a vampire, what you do and don't do with a vampire, how to kill a
Or
vampire.
identify a vampire, like
Right,
they go through
right.
all of that.
So they know all of that kind of stuff, all of the lore and that kind of thing, and they're trying to get this this other kid to join their little group because they know that his brother is hanging out with the vampires.
Yep. And, you know, he becomes suspicious and actually starts to believe them. He contacts them. He goes, "Yeah, your brother's probably a vampire." Because Corey Feldman's doing a Rambo impersonation through the entire movie. He's even wearing a red bandana.
He's even got the bandana around his head.
Fantastic that he did that. Like, I like it. So if you want to see Corey Feldman do a Rambo impression, watch this movie.
Yeah, your brother's already a vampire.
He's like, you don't want to kill him. You might as well go to bed with a garlic necklace on. Like
Yeah.
he says that in the film, and it just made me laugh every single time it's said.
It's and there's humor through the movie.
Yep.
There is a level of violence in the movie because it's vampires.
Yep.
Okay, it's the 80s, so there's going to be a level of violence in it, and
It does have language.
it is going to have language in it.
Yeah,
because
this is not for kids. If we need to make this clear right now, like this is a horror movie. This is not for kids. This is not for little kids. This movie was rated R, even though there are kids in the movie. Doesn't make a difference.
Right.
This is a parent only movie. So put the kids to bed. You know.
Now, I wouldn't call this a horror movie on the level of Salem's Lot. This is more of a I would say kind of like a dark comedy,
yeah,
but
I can see that.
but I wouldn't put it in the same vein as Beetlejuice.
No,
because
it
it's
has gore and
definitely
everything
not
else, yeah.
a comedy.
Yeah.
It still does have some horror elements.
And they
to
do
it.
have jump scares, like
Jump
those
scares.
are in there.
Yeah.
But they try to break that up with having the humor on top of that.
Right.
And everything
and
else
the-
that we've mentioned.
And
so
the
far.
Frog Brothers are the comedic element to the movie.
Oh, absolutely. They are the comic relief in the film.
Right,
Yes.
right, and they do a wonderful job to offset that balance.
And again, this was changing the script of how vampire movies are done, because normally Van Helsing's done through the lens of the very serious, proper character. So again, They did away with the How Dracula, he's not in a castle on the hill kind of situation.
Right.
So they had to do the same thing with the Van Helsing characters, where now they're the comedic relief and they're funny, and one of them happens to sound like Rambo.
And the thing is, what makes it so funny is that they take what they're doing so serious.
Yeah, Santa Carla has a major vampire problem.
Right. They just take it so serious. But it's funny the way they do it because they're kids taking this really, really seriously. Like they're the only ones that know anything about it. And probably they probably really are. They're probably really the only ones in the whole town that believe in vampires and that know that these people are vampires.
Yeah, and I think because the fact that kids are solving this, it has that Goonies appeal, and maybe that's one of the reasons this became a cult status, is because you're seeing this through the lens of children, because normally it's adults dealing with vampires.
Right.
You know, Van Helsing's always this much older gentleman that's killing a much older Dracula, so there's no young people, so they flip the script so everybody's young in it except for just the parents. And so it brings a nice, fresh element, and this is something that they use going forward with vampire movies, and kind of led the way to eventually the Twilight series, True Blood,
Right.
Vampire Diaries. It just continued in that same vein. They're like, vampires can be sexy. That's kind of the point they were trying to get across, and it worked. It worked.
And so what ends up happening is the mom, living there with her kids and her dad. She ends up meeting this gentleman and starts dating this gentleman. And spoiler, if you want to go ahead and turn it off here. Spoiler,
Come back after you see the movie.
Come back after you see the
get
movie.
our rating. Yeah.
But spoiler, it turns out that the boyfriend that she meets is a vampire. Not only is he a vampire, he is the vampire. All right. He is the one who turned these teenage kids into vampires.
Yep. And his plan was, these boys need a mother, so I'm going to turn your boys into vampires, and then you'll have no choice but to join me.
Right.
So he explains the whole plot, and it is a nice twist because you really do up to that point to think David, Kiefer Sutherland's character, is the main vampire.
Right.
And then when he gets, spoilers, killed, and suddenly Michael isn't turning back human, he's like, I still feel the same. And then that's when the mom walks in with the boyfriend, and they're like, but we did a test on you. You weren't a vampire. You passed the test. He goes, silly boy, you never invite a vampire into your home.
Right.
You lose your power.
Right.
And see, there was the one rule that the frog, and they looked at the main frog brother, and he's like, did you know that? Of course we knew that. Again, the comedic stuff is just another reason to watch this movie.
Right.
It's little things like that make it great.
80s humor. It's 80s humor all the way through it. It's really great.
Oh, the clothes. Like some of the clothes that Corey Haim wears. It just, woo, I watched it again today for this review, and I'm just like, the outfit he wore when he first goes into the comic book shop, this is goofy. And they even comment, even for the time, what he was wearing was weird.
Yeah.
And then and of course he turns it around and flips on them and talks about how weird they are, and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, you'll see what I mean. Go watch the movie and you'll be like, I gotta leave them a comment. They were right.
Yeah, it really does a good job at portraying how teenagers would deal with vampires and how teenage vampires would be. And like he was saying, the Frog Brothers end up, what happens is the older brother ends up becoming a vampire, and he doesn't want to be a vampire anymore, and the only way to turn him back human is to kill the head vampire. So they do end up killing Kiefer Sutherland's character, because they believe he is the one that's the head vampire, and once they kill him, boom, all of them go back to being just regular people. But when they do it, he doesn't turn. So Kiefer Sutherland's character is dead, but the brother is still a vampire, and that's when it's revealed that older gentleman that their
And-
mother has been dating is the head vampire, and they have
this
no
guy-
power against him.
Yeah, this guy's like a sweater vest kind of guy. Like, you would never think that he was the head vampire because,
Right.
again, we're preconditioned that the like Dracula type vampire is supposed to be evil, lurking, and
He
all
has
this kind of stuff.
glasses.
He just looks like a normal
Everyday
Ned Flanders
kinda
type of
yeah,
guy.
Yeah, glasses, the sweater vest. He wears a like an overcoat.
Yeah,
But it's nothing ominous.
There's nothing ominous about this guy. You would think just, oh yeah, that's a guy who's just, oh, he's just reading his morning paper and sipping his tea. Like,
Right.
you would think that about this kind of guy. Like, there's nothing assuming about him at all.
Clean cut hair, so I mean he's just like the typical everyday boring guy, but if you think about it from a vampire point of view, that's how he wants to fit in,
Yep.
especially in a community like they were living in. You don't want to stand out. He wants to fit in.
But it's a big twist, and you don't see it coming. Especially, I didn't see it coming as a kid. I was like, whoa. So David's not the main vampire, and then when he does, and of course, obviously adults could read it. They're like, okay, David was a red herring. Like, clearly that's what the case really was. And I'm sure if I had watched this movie as an adult and didn't already know the ending, I'd have been like, yeah, Max is the vampire.
Yeah, when I went to see when I watched it back then, yeah, it was a big surprise as to who was the head vampire. It really was, but it was great. So, remember, if you do sit down and watch this movie, you don't want the kids to watch it because of the language, because of the potential violence that's in it, and because of other factors that are there. Because remember, it is from the 80s, so it does have some kind of adult situations in it as well.
Yeah, there is an intimate scene in the cave with Jason Patrick and Jamie Gertz. They don't show anything, but it's heavily implied. He's shirtless. Right. There's some kissing going on. And that's kind of a cringy moment if you've got your little kids sitting there, and having to explain, what's happening there, you know? Right. As Cry Little Sister's playing in the background, so that's something to be aware of. If you want to avoid that cringiness, put them to bed. Then watch that, Then
watch this. Yep. But don't worry about being too creeped out by it. It does have some creepy moments. But remember, it is the 80s, and it is kind of a dark... It's kind of difficult to really...
Yeah, this one don't fit just narrowly in one genre. And that's the reason why I wanted to review
because
this one.
It's not dark humor like Beetlejuice was. But then again, it's not a terrifying movie like Salem's Lot would have been. It's just right there, right in the middle. Yep. And they do an excellent job of just putting those two things together that definitely would not fit, putting them together, and it worked.
It was lightning in a bottle. It was right director, right writers, right kids, right music, and it just fit. And that's the reason why this movie will continue.